to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today, Dane Friedel has a story on how climate change is set to sharply reduce the incomes of people worldwide over the next 25 years. Brian Lynn presents this week's Technology Report. Finally, we hear the lesson of the day from Andrew Smith and Jill Robbins. But first,
a new study from a German research group says climate change will reduce everyone's income by about 19% over the next 25 years. That would be about $38 trillion per year. But the report warns it could get worse between 25 and 75 years from now if nothing is done soon. The numbers come from a study published in April in the journal Nature. Researchers from Germany's Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, a nonprofit group partly supported by Germany's government, wrote the report. They said, climate change will cause massive economic damages within the next 25 years in almost all countries around the world. Study co-author Leonie Wentz said developed countries such as Germany, the United States, and France would face smaller decreases. Wentz said the researchers projected that people living in those countries will see 11 to 13% less income. The study writers said the greatest economic effect will be felt by people in the least developed nations. They said countries that are least responsible will suffer the most. Max Kotz is the lead author. He said the researchers first estimated what the world's economic growth would be without climate change. They then applied those values to the damage to economies if climate change continues at its current pace. Kotz noted that there will still be economic growth, but it will be 19% lower in most places once the damage of climate change is taken into account. Kotz said most climate scientists have been looking at extreme weather events, such as heat waves, floods, hurricanes, and other large storms. However, he notes the overall impacts are still mainly driven by average warming, overall temperature increases. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, said the average world temperature last year was a record. The weather agency said that number was 1.35 degrees Celsius above the average during pre-industrial times, before modern technology. In the U.S., the southeastern and southwestern states, such as New Mexico and Arizona, are estimated to suffer the largest economic effects. In Europe, Spain and Italy are likely to feel the effect more than countries like Denmark and Germany. Areas that are usually cold for most of the year, Canada, Russia, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, will have good results from warming. Kotz notes that the world's poorest countries are also the least prepared to adapt to climate change. Those countries are least responsible for the change, but they will suffer 60% more income loss than wealthy nations. It underlies some of the injustice elements of climate, Kotz said. The study looked at 1,600 areas around the world that are smaller than countries. Kotz and his group then examined a number of climate influences and considered how long economic shocks related to climate would last. computer systems were used to estimate the effects on each person's income in the area. Katz's work proposes that economic changes over the next 25 years are likely to happen. He said cuts in greenhouse gases will only reduce the lost income by a small amount. But there are two different possibilities for 2050 and beyond. If the world works to reduce warming to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times, the economic impact would be 20% of global income. But if climate changes substantially more, the effect could be a 60% loss of income. Katz said that means that people should not think the doomsday is already here and nothing can be done. The new study predicted a larger decrease in the world's income than a similar study in 2015 suggested. The study said the world's economy would shrink by 23% by 2100. Marshall Burke is a climate scientist at Stanford University who wrote the 2015 study. He said, "The new German study makes a lot of sense." Burke was not part of the recent study. He warned that he is not completely sure about some of the methods, but he agrees with the idea. Burke added, "The big picture is basically right." Francis Moore is an economist and teaches environmental studies at the University of California, Davis. Moore, who also was not part of the study, said climate damage adds up over time. That is why fighting climate change today, even at a high cost, will have good results later. I'm Dan Friedel.
Studies show that military officials are increasingly deploying systems to interfere with aircraft navigation systems in conflict areas. But such tools can put other aircraft at risk. Airplanes depend on complex navigation systems to guide pilots and to warn of possible danger during a flight. Such systems are known as Global Navigation Satellite Systems, or GNSS. The most commonly used GNSS system is called GPS, which stands for Global Positioning System. The GPS system is owned by the American government and operated by the U.S. Space Force. The GPS system uses a series of satellites to send signals to receivers, which identify the exact positions of objects. The U.S. Space Force says it develops and operates all space and Earth-based activities related to the GPS system. A civilian version is available for people to use freely around the world. A military GPS service is also available to U.S. and Allied armed forces, as well as approved federal agencies. Other GNSS systems operate internationally. These include Beidou, which is run by the Chinese government. The European Union leads the Galileo GNSS, while Russia operates a service called GLONASS. Systems have been developed to disrupt these GPS services, especially in areas of conflict. Military leaders and groups have deployed such tools to harm enemy aircraft operations. Industry experts say such efforts affect electronic systems and can lead to dangerous flight errors. There are two main methods used to disrupt GPS operations. One is called jamming. Jamming involves sending out radio signals within an area to overpower all other signals so that GPS receiver devices cannot effectively operate. The other method is called spoofing. This is when technology is used to trick a GPS receiver into estimating a false position. Incidents of jamming and spoofing have been identified in several conflict areas. These include around Ukraine, which is fighting Russia, and around Gaza, where Israel is fighting Hamas. The French news agency AFP reports that Hamas fighters in Gaza have been using jamming methods to block GPS signals used to guide Israeli drones operating there. In an effort to keep its drones flying in Gaza, Israel has been using a technology designed to resist jamming. The technology, called GPS Dome 2, was created by Israeli developer Infinidome. The company's products are designed to protect against jamming tools. They were deployed soon after Hamas's October 7th attacks in Israel that started the Gaza conflict. In addition to using anti-jamming tools to keep its own aircraft operating, Israel has also taken measures to disrupt the GPS of Hamas and other opponents, the news agency reported. Israel's army has admitted that days after the Hamas attacks, it moved to proactively disrupt GPS in order to carry out operational needs. Disruptions by Israel included both jamming and spoofing methods, AFP reported. In one example, an AFP reporter standing on a street in Jerusalem was shown on GPS to be near Cairo, Egypt. In another case, a reporter in the West Bank city of Jenin was listed on GPS as being at Beirut's airport in Lebanon. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA, has been warning that GNSS signal disruptions have intensified. In some cases, such disruptions can change a plane's path or even cause it to land at the wrong place, EASA said. The agency's acting chief, Luke Titgat, told AFP that GNSS systems are necessary to improve safety in increasingly crowded airspaces. But we have seen a sharp rise in attacks on these systems, which presents a safety risk, he said. Titgat suggested that aviation agencies should consider changing the current certification requirements for navigation and landing systems. Todd Humphreys and a team of researchers at the University of Texas at Austin examine GPS signals around the world. After October 7th, the team discovered spoofing activity that led some planes headed for Israel to disappear from GPS for a short period. Humphreys told AFP the examinations showed Israel appears to be engaging in GPS spoofing as a defensive measure. He noted the false GPS signals had tricked receivers around northern Israel into thinking they were at Beirut's airport. I'm Brian Lynn.
now Brian Lynn joins me to talk more about his technology report. Hi, Brian. Good to have you here.
Of course, Ashley. Thank you for having me.
This week, you reported on how GPS signals are being disrupted as part of military operations in Ukraine and Gaza. Your report notes that such disruptions are becoming more common, but are not that easy to stop. Why is this?
Yes, so industry experts say this kind of activity, both jamming and spoofing of GPS signals, is quite difficult to block. One reason is that these disruptive technologies are already out there and can be quickly deployed by groups to areas where military operations are currently taking place. The report noted, for example, that Hamas fighters in Gaza have regularly used jamming tools to prevent Israeli drones from operating there. And this is why Israel started using a new technology product that aims to protect GPS signals around Gaza.
Are there currently any international efforts being discussed to try to deal with these problems?
Yes, there have been some efforts in that direction. In January, there was an international meeting in Germany that brought together government representatives, security specialists, and technology manufacturers. These groups discussed the problem and possible solutions, but did not produce any specific agreements or regulatory paths forward. Organizers did, though, state an urgent need for more international cooperation in the collection and sharing of GPS safety data. And they also identified a need for more technology solutions to fight the problem, as well as more specific training for airline pilots.
All right. Thanks again, Brian, for joining me, and thank you for that report.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashley.
VOA Learning English has launched a new program for children. It is called Let's Learn English with Anna. The new course aims to teach children American English through asking and answering questions and experiencing fun situations. For more information, visit our website, learningenglish.voanews.com.
My name is Anna Mateo.
My name is Andrew Smith.
And I'm Jill Robbins.
You're listening to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. Welcome to the part of the show where we help you do more with our series, Let's Learn English. The series shows Anna Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C.
Being in Washington helps Anna learn about U.S. history. There are many memorials and monuments in the city that connect to important people and events in the country's past. As we mentioned in a previous lesson of the day, a memorial is something that pays respect to the memory of the lives of people who have died.
And a monument is a large structure, usually made out of stone, built to remind people of a famous person or a famous historical event. Lessons 25 and 26 of the series show Anna learning about U.S. history at the monuments and memorials.
Near the Lincoln Memorial, a man who is interested in U.S. history runs into Anna by accident. Let's listen.
Hello from Washington, D.C. This city has many monuments and memorials. Today, I am visiting the ones built in memory of our presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. I want to learn more about them. Hey, watch out!
Sorry, I did not see you.
You were not looking. You should be more careful.
I know I should be more careful, but this game is really fun.
What kind of game?
What kind of game do you think the man who bumped into Anna is playing? A video game? Let's find out.
What kind of game?
You have to find things that aren't really there.
How can you find things that aren't really there?
They're in your phone. See?
I see. It's like a scavenger hunt.
That's right.
I don't have time for games. I want to learn about U.S. presidents.
Then you should play this game. When you find an American symbol, you win points and a fun fact about a U.S. president.
I have time for this game.
To play this game, people use their phones to find information. To find the information, they must go to several places in the city. When they reach a particular place, for example, a memorial or monument, the phone will show them the information they want to find about U.S. history.
How can you find things that aren't really there?
They're in your phone. See?
I see. It's like a scavenger hunt.
That's right.
We call this kind of game where you go to several places to find things that are hidden a scavenger hunt. It can be a lot of fun to play.
And in nature, there are animals that are scavengers, such as vultures. These large birds eat animals that have died or been killed by other animals.
And the verb scavenge, that's spelled S-C-A-V-E-N-G-E, means to look for or collect things that have been left or that are not wanted.
We have another newer expression in English to describe an activity where people scavenge in large garbage containers called dumpsters. We call this dumpster diving.
That's right. I have never been dumpster diving, but I have heard about that. Now, let's listen again to what Anna says when the man bumps into her.
Hey, watch out!
Sorry, I did not see you.
You were not looking. You should be more careful.
I know I should be more careful, but this game is really fun.
Both Anna and the man use the modal should. It is common to use the modal should to give advice or suggest that something is a good thing to do. The tone of voice we use with the word should gives the advice a positive feeling, a neutral feeling, or a negative feeling of disapproval. Let's listen to 3 examples.
You were not looking. You should be more careful.
I know I should be more careful. Then you should play this game.
Did you hear how each example had a different feeling or effect? The last example had a more positive feeling of encouragement.
Then you should play this game.
The first example expressed disapproval.
You should be more careful.
And the next example had a neutral tone, not too positive and not too negative.
I know I should be more careful.
Remember that there's another way we use the modal should. We use it to express what we think will likely happen. Listen to this example.
The bus should be here in about 10 minutes.
The modal supposed to also shares the same 2 meanings as should. We use it to suggest correct behavior, or we use it to express what we think will likely happen. These 2 examples show the difference.
You're supposed to wash your hands before you cook.
The train is supposed to arrive at 3:30. You might hear people saying something different when they speak quickly. The train was supposed to arrive at 3:30, but it didn't. Here, a two-syllable word, supposed, becomes more like one syllable, sposed.
I'm Andrew Smith, and you're listening to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. On our website, you can download a lesson plan for Let's Learn English Lesson 25. It includes a game and other ways you can practice giving advice with the modal should. The lesson plan also includes a glossary of vocabulary from the show, as well as a quiz.
And remember that you can download a lesson plan for every episode of Let's Learn English.
Jill, there's one more modal we ought to mention from Lesson 25.
Yes, there is. We ought to mention the modal ought to.
Just like should and supposed to, ought to can suggest behavior or express the idea that something is likely to happen.
Listen to this example from Lesson 25 and see how the speaker uses the modal ought to.
What symbol are you looking for now?
I am looking for the bald eagle. That is 100 points. It should be near the Washington Monument.
This game is awesome.
You ought to buy the app right now. It's called Catch Americana.
Got it. Catch Americana. Thanks.
You can hear that the speaker makes a suggestion by using the modal ought to.
Because he is not speaking very quickly, he pronounces it like this.
You ought to buy the app right now.
You can hear him pronounce the letter T. But as we have explained in many previous episodes, remember that the pronunciation changes when we talk faster. Ought to changes to oughta. For example, listen to this short exchange between Jill and me.
Have you been to the new Spy Museum downtown?
No, have you?
Yeah, it's great. You ought to go.
Oughta. That makes me think of a line from a song by the American musician Billy Joel, where he says, "You oughta know by now."
Well, Andrew, I think we ought to bring this lesson of the day to a close. But first, let's ask our listeners a question. What game do you play on your phone? Write to us at learningenglish@voanews.com or answer in the comments on YouTube.
We should also tell our listeners that they can learn more on our website, learningenglish.voanews.com. They can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Thanks for listening to the Learning English podcast. I'm Jill Robbins.
And I'm Andrew Smith.
That's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.